folks, I'd like to welcome everybody here today on another edition of the Oral History of Harbour Grace, a project of the Board of Culture, Innovation and Business. And welcome here today. I have three very distinguished guests, I might add. I'd like to thank them for coming in to the 150-year-old building we have here, the Customs House. And it's so nice to have Susan Oke here with me, Molly Oke, and also Catherine Oke. Now, all three, as you might know, are from the Oke family, Molly and her two daughters. And I'd like to welcome them here today. And what we decided to do here today was just to come in as part of our series to sit around and talk a little bit about the Oke family, tell the Oke story, so to speak. That sounds like a long endeavor, but it's not what we mean to have here today. Just as if we're chatting around our living room, we're trying to effectively do the same kind of thing with our show here today. So much history in Harbour Grace, as you know, and we're so pleased to have you to come in here today to talk a bit about that to us. So, so besides saying welcome, I'd also like to say how pleased we are that we have two former workers from the museum that were former guides here. Not that long ago, Susan was a guide here, and also Catherine was a guide here, and Molly, of course, was also instrumental as part of this museum. I believe, Molly, you actually were on the board.
Yes, I was.
At some time, and her husband, their father, Bill Oke, William Austin Oke, I think,
Yes.
was also a board member here and served many positions on the executive. So I'm sure they have many things to tell us about the museum if we wanted them to talk about that. We just heard some stories that we can't really repeat.
No.
So then I think what we'll do then is begin with just a couple of questions. I'm from Riverhead originally, and still am actually. Haven't been booted out yet. Haven't been booted out yet, thank God. But being from Riverhead and having gone to a school system, the Catholic school system in Harbour Grace, we never had a lot of contact with people in the other systems. You know, the other school system, like the Oke family or the anybody that attended the Avalon North School Board, for example. We didn't get to know them until university years, which was quite a shame, right? But in recent years, history of Harbour Grace, Riverhead and the South Side and Bristol Hope, this local area, has enthused me unbelievably so. So I'm getting to know a lot of families. One of the families that jump out to me that I thought, as part of this project, that they might be interested in as well, was the Oke family. And of course, we've had many entries now in our book, what we call the WordPress entry here, our blog for the Conception Bay Museum site. And we've come across many things, anecdotes, historical references and things like that about the Oke family. And I was quite interested, and the more I read, and the more I read now about the Oke family, the more I discover how great and what a great part the Oke family played, not just in the history of Harbour Grace in the area, but in the whole region, Newfoundland in particular, starting with the famous Robert Oke, of course, and then, of course, his son, Edward Langdon Oke. Edward Langdon Oke was born in 1825, and he came here, and he pretty well was the first lighthouse keeper on the Harbour Grace Lighthouse, which was on Harbour Grace Island. So when did you first, as children, or Molly as wife of the great-grandchild of Edward Langdon Oke, when did you first hear or recall hearing about Edward Oke, the lighthouse keeper? And what do you know about the circumstances of his death, may I say?
Well, I guess coming into the family, I heard bits and pieces of the family history.
Yes.
And I always heard that Edward fell through the ice near
Salvation.
Salvation
Okay.
Rock
Yeah.
in Harbour Grace. And the story was he was supposedly trying to save one of his co-workers.
Right.
And he was also responsible for a boat race on the harbour
Okay,
before the regatta was ever
right.
on the go, and between the workers,
Yeah.
and a boat race from the mouth of the harbour up to Riverhead.
Wow, just imagine.
So
So he's I read and you just said
yeah,
that he was instrumental in kind of the beginnings of the regatta, really.
yes,
And didn't
really.
didn't he receive an honor, like posthumously, obviously,
Yeah.
by some historical society in Newfoundland, sport having something to do with sports, with respect to instigating or starting the regatta? Did I read that somewhere? He was given
Yes, I've heard
award?
that.
Yeah.
Pardon me, over the years, yes,
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Her grandmother say that as well.
Yeah.
She talked about, you know, his death and how tragic it was,
Yeah.
because he was a relatively young man. He left, I think, it was 4 children at the
Yeah.
time, and
Okay.
a young wife who was not well either.
No,
And you know, but from the little bits and pieces that I know, what my grandmother told me,
Yeah.
Dad's mom was that, you know, he was well known as being a very kind and gentle person,
Right.
and that would have been something he would have done. He would never have left somebody else to die.
Right.
And if he lost his life in the process, well, that was just par for the course.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Fanny, you asked about
Yes.
Fanny. Well,
Yes.
Fanny was Frances, really,
Right.
which was his wife.
Right.
Yeah.
Now it says that she was stuff I read. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't believe everything I read, but it's not like I got to depend on now.
That's right.
But Frances or Fanny, she was somewhat of an invalid. She was
Yes.
crippled or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that, and she had a store
She did. It was on Water Street near Victoria Street.
near Victoria Street, and it was a general store, and she had other children as well, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She had 4.
Wow,
young
and the
children,
struggle
too.
to raise
Yeah.
him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess as ill as she was, I guess there had to be income. I mean, the family had to be taken care of, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And she died relatively young too, didn't she, Mom? I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
I read somewhere that.
haven't got her.
I think,
Yes.
I think in the history
Yeah.
she was in her 30s.
Yeah.
Wow, just imagine.
Yeah.
So he was born in 1825, and he died in 62. And then the man he actually tried to save, did actually save, was a man by the name of Snow. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's
Yes.
He
right.
was Snow.
Yeah.
And he was his assistant at the Lighthouse. Or
That's
Yes.
right.
just imagine having to walk over the ice to get to your place of work,
That's
and
right.
then walk back in, right?
But
Exactly.
just imagine, can you remember ever seeing the harbour frozen from the island in?
Pretty skiffy, isn't it? I mean, basically skimpy
Yeah.
and with ice. I mean, I guess they copied their way to want to use
On the
Newfoundland
pans,
word,
yeah.
jump from pan to pan with
That's
their
right.
sticks. And this other guy, poor guy, went down between the ice,
Yeah.
and Edward Langdon Oak,
Yeah.
the first,
Wait for 'em.
Yeah.
reached for him, and as you probably got him in on the ice, he slipped himself
That's
and went
right.
down between the ice and died.
Yeah.
Now here's a kind of a morbid question: did they recover his body and things like that? Was he actually
I
buried?
don't
don't
think.
know.
I don't
I
think
don't
so.
think they ever
yeah.
did.
Seems to me grandmother said that they never did get the closure with the body, right?
Right. Wow. Just
And see,
imagine.
at the time too, you know, with all the ice in the harbor, and there was no technology like there is now to search. It probably wouldn't have been safe to go out even to look for him, you know.
Just imagine. So the Mr. Snow that he saved, are the Snows in Harbour Grace related to this man now?
Oh, yes, I would say.
Yeah.
I would say, but I don't know because there's a couple of branches of Snows.
Wouldn't it be interesting if they were to hear this show and got into their family history? And because we know that the name of the gentleman is in the annals of history.
Yes.
It is the person that he saved.
Yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
what a legacy though to leave, to be the first lighthouse keeper to die in that way.
That's
And
right.
then to die saving another gentleman, and to live on in history, and to have produced and generate the family that he was responsible for
That's
today.
right.
So moving on then to William Austin Oak, which was his son, right?
Yeah.
William Austin Oak the first, 1857. I see here to 1923. Now here was another character from the Oak family. Do you have that greatness, Susan?
No. Not at all.
Yeah? No?
Not at all, no.
No.
Yeah. What do you know about William Austin Oak? When I read this, I thought that Edward Langdon Oak was by far probably the leading person I want to know about. But this person here, when I read
No.
about his life,
He came first.
that got shifted up in priority. And I think, what do you know about him? Can you, for a listening group or a watching audience, what can you tell me about William Austin Oak?
Well, he entered the printing business of John F. Munn
Right.
in and company, and which produced the Harbour Grace Standard.
Correct. Yeah.
And he became a partner in 1890 and finally became the owner. I
Okay.
guess he did whatever had to be done. He was 3 times elected as a Liberal member for the Newfoundland House of Assembly in 1897, 1900 and 1904. And he resigned before the 1909 election. And then he was appointed a district court judge.
Yeah.
And he died then in 1923, and his illness was short. He had mastoid problems, and they
Okay.
did surgery. So I've heard your grandmother talk about that.
Wow.
And he died actually up in the house, I think, the old house, because there was no, hospitals were different then, it wasn't the same.
So for people watching, your grandmother then would be the wife of William Austin or the daughter?
No,
My
the
grandma,
daughter-in-law.
daughter-in-law.
Would be the daughter-in-law of William
William
Austin.
Austin.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Okay, right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
she would have had a pretty good memory, eh?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
And you,
yeah.
you spoke to her about this
Yeah.
William Austin.
Yeah.
Oh,
We always knew him as Judge Oak.
Judge
Yes,
Oak.
that's the
Yeah.
way he was
That's how
always
we know him.
referred. And see, actually, when I was in university in my first degree, I
Right.
did my my last year history paper on the Harbour Grace Standard
Okay.
because I was really interested in the paper and knowing more about it.
We'd like to get a copy of that.
Yeah, I'd have to
Good.
look really hard to get it, but yeah, and I do believe there's a copy in the CNS at Mont
Okay.
as well. But in that, in that research that I did, it was really fascinating to learn about the paper. It started in 1859.
Right.
The spelling even of Harbour Grace and the Harbour Grace Standard.
Harbor.
Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly.
And I got a really interesting story to tell you around that in a minute too. But the paper turned over to job printing sometime in the 1920s, 1930s. And the other day, myself and Kathy chatted about it, and she said, "I wonder why they did that." I said, "Well, I guess it's all about money."
Yeah.
You
It
know,
was
I-
business.
It was business.
related,
They
yeah.
were they could because as a newspaper selling advertising is one thing, but then doing job printing, I mean, they would make a lot more doing individual jobs for businesses around. And of course, as time went by, then with all the new technology,
Yeah.
things become obsolete. But I mean that from the time we were little tiny children until now, I mean, we knew everything about that. About the
Yeah.
office, we called it. We lived upstairs, but I think the story is worth telling because it's not that old. But when my grandfather Edward Langdon worked in the business, okay, it was job printing.
Not William Austin. William Austin's
No, that's
father.
right.
Okay.
Not my dad, but my grandfather,
Right,
Edward
exactly.
Langdon.
Yeah.
We called him Bamsey, but he was Ned to everybody.
Yes. Yes.
So
That's William Austin for the audience. That's William Austin's son.
Son.
Yes.
Son,
Correct.
yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So anyway, since I've retired, we have a little Airbnb, and we had these gentlemen from the States show up, and came to stay with us, and a father and 2 sons, and they, came and they registered and whatever, and they came upstairs to get a separate key
Yeah.
for downstairs, and when the gentleman walked in the door and looked up on the wall,
Yeah.
I have the front page of some of the Harbour Grace standards
Yes.
framed on my walls.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, "Why do you have those newspapers on your wall?" And I said, "Well, he was from the States, so what would he even know about?" And I said, "Well, I'm not really sure what you're talking about." And he said, "This is one of the reasons we've come to Newfoundland is to see who's left of this family." And I said,
Oak family.
"Yeah."
Oh, it's crazy.
And I know, and of all the places he could have stayed, so I was a little concerned. I mean, this man was kind of really emotional about it all. But anyway, as it turned out, to make a long story short, his father grew up here in Harbour Grace. That last name is eluding me at the moment. Oh my goodness.
That's okay.
And I know it so well. Anyway, his father grew up in Harbour Grace, and he said that his father's family were fairly poor off and really didn't have many opportunities. And he said, but his grandfather recognized that his father was a pretty smart man and was capable of great things. So he went to my grandfather, Edward Langdon, and said, "Will you apprentice my son in the printing business?"
Okay.
And my grandfather apparently said, "Yes, indeed I will." And for 4 years he worked at the Standard and commercial printing and so on and so forth, and did his apprenticeship. And then upon completion, he went to Boston and had a very successful career working with some of the Boston papers for the rest of his life.
As a journalist.
No, as a printer.
Printer, okay.
And because he knew all the equipment and, he was apprenticed for 4
Letterpress.
years. Letterpress,
Typeset.
yeah. It was
Typeset.
typeset. Not like an offset that they
No.
use today. And so he said it really changed the fortune of his father and his father's family, because he said then his father sent all of his sons to university.
Okay.
So they kind of developed their. So this gentleman was actually a professor at the university before he retired in Boston. One of his sons was a cinematographer in California, and the other son was a minister in the Boston area, but teaching in the college, right? So he said they came back to Newfoundland to kind of see
Wow.
who was left. And he said, I don't understand. I said, well, that was my grandfather.
Talk about a lesson in what one thing doing good for one person can do.
Yeah.
They gave him a break in the printing business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's unbelievable, isn't it? And all that goodness that came out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wonderful.
anyway, they came out, they stayed with us, and they came out and met Mom and went to church to see where, even found initials carved in the Anglican
Well,
church bench.
His
Uncle.
uncle had carved his initials in the Anglican church
Yeah.
in one of the
Pews.
pews. And they asked Susan if there was anybody left in Harbour Grace, and she said, I was there. Would I mind them coming? And she said no, so I met them there.
Okay.
And after church they came up at the house. And they did find the initials carved
In the pew. In the
pew.
church.
And their grandparents, his grandparents,
Yeah.
are up in the Anglican cemetery. Wells.
Wells, thank you.
Wells.
Quite a history, eh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they found their family through that. But I know we've kind of jumped ahead a
No,
generation.
we haven't. It's good.
But it's a story that's worth telling, because,
It
the little I knew of my grandfather, because I was only about 5 or 6 when he died, was that he always was a very kind man. And obviously, he didn't think anything of doing that, and changed a whole generation of people in his family.
And don't feel bad about going to the next generation, because Edward Langdon II, whom we're talking about now, having given this Wells guy a break,
Right.
he also had a great prominence in Harbour Grace. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I've seen everywhere I go upstairs in the archives here, I see pictures of Neddy Oak, right? Holding a cricket bat or holding a soccer ball,
Yes.
1921. It must have been a fantastic athlete.
Yeah.
He was.
He was, and then he was a veteran. He
Yeah.
was
Yes,
in
World
World
War
War
One.
One. He
Yes.
was quartermaster sergeant.
Sergeant, yeah.
Sniper.
Yeah, which sniper.
Sniper?
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
and but he was invalided out because he had a chest condition.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the story was, and I've heard Susan's grandmother and Kathy's grandmother say this, that the family didn't want him to enlist because of this chest condition.
Yeah.
But because he was the judge's son,
Right.
he said, no, I'm going to enlist, because if I don't, they will say it's
Right.
because who I am. But he was invalided out. I don't
You
know
know
how
what?
long he was in.
Do you know what particular areas? I know he's in France, obviously. Do you know what what battles he was in, or anything of that
He never
nature?
talked.
Never talked about
He
it.
didn't,
Never.
did he?
No, he wouldn't talk about it. And on
So it
Edward
was-
probably knows.
Edward might know.
So it was infantry, was it? Like on the battlefield as such?
Yeah, he was
yeah,
sniper.
he was sniper.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he never talked about it. And Memorial Day, he always went, and it was very quiet that day,
July 1st.
and wouldn't talk about it. But the veterans, there was one in particular here who was an invalid, and he always went and spent time with him, and it was any veteran,
Yeah.
But Memorial Day was his quiet day, but he never talked about it, wouldn't talk about it.
Right. Wow. You said something that interests me now. I didn't know that you said you guys lived over the print shop, right?
Yes.
So, but you recently lived in the old house up on Victoria Street. to the
Yes,
top.
because Bill's mother
Mhm.
got sick,
Right.
and she lived there by herself. So
Right.
we moved up there and lived with her.
That was Ed Oak's
Wife,
wife. I'm just trying
yeah,
to keep all this
Jessie,
together. Yes.
Jessie,
Jessie. Okay.
yeah.
And
Now-
that's where you got Jessica now for.
So that's the story.
That's the
I'm not sure it actually happened that way, but
No.
that's the story. It pleased my grandmother to think that, so we let her think that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great story. What about? I mean, I go back now. Your grandfather Edward Oak. Was he a bit of a journalist at all? I know he was print man.
Yes,
Yeah.
Did he write as well?
yeah,
Yeah.
He did. Right?
And Gladys
which
did a lot
was
of
his
editing.
sister.
Did
Yeah.
a lot of the editing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
she was probably one of the first female editors,
Yeah.
if not the first female editor, really, in the province.
Was she a writer as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I noticed in a lot of the standard productions in the standards, I noticed that the reporter, it just says reporter, it doesn't give the sub name, doesn't give
No.
the
No.
subtitle of the, doesn't give the author, the by author, doesn't give that, eh?
No.
So what you see is reporter, reporter, reporter. So I can well imagine.
Gladys.
Sister
Yeah.
Gladys did as well, yeah.
So
Yeah.
she died subsequent to him or before him?
No, and Gladys died. No, after.
Okay.
'Cause
Yes.
she died.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know
did-
how many years ago.
Did Edward Oke have formal education, university, or anything of that nature to be such a writer and
Edward
To-
Oke went to Field.
Field
Right.
College,
Field
St. John's?
College in St.
Right.
John's.
Okay.
In fact, Mom had some memorabilia that he had
Okay.
at the house, remember? And I brought it in and donated it
Yes.
to their archives.
Okay.
So
And I
they
have
could-
some of his books,
Yes.
Okay. You have some of his books, eh?
some of
Wow.
his school books.
Is that right? Okay. He went to.
And I have a book of poetry that he owned.
So did they go to Victoria Street School, or did they go to Harbour Grace Grammar School, or Edward
Oh,
Oke?
went before Field.
Let me
I
see.
don't
What
know.
year was he? What year did he pass? We know. What year? Let me see.
Mommy was
Birthday.
born at 60.
66.
He died in 66.
He died in 66.
66 to
Yeah.
93. It's possibility he went to Harbour Grace Grammar School,
Probably.
which was in front of the courthouse.
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
To Roddick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
I
That's
would
right.
say.
And then,
Yeah.
and then went to Field because Aunt Gladys went to Spencer.
Yeah.
Okay. She
the
went to
inter-
Spencer.
The interesting story about him, and we talked about this one the other day too, was that my grandmother and other people wanted him to run for
Politics?
as the member for the district.
Under the Liberal Party? Because
Yes.
Yes.
William
Well,
Austin
he-
was Liberal. Right?
He actually
Yeah.
took sick and was rushed from Joey Smallwood's house on Roach's Line, and that's when he died.
Yes, I remember something.
Right.
66,
He
right?
was a contemporary of Joey Smallwood, but anyway, they wanted him to run, and my grandmother said to me several times, we used to chat about it, and she said she was really upset with him. And one morning he came down and he said to her, and this is how she put it, you can correct it, Mom, if it's wrong, I can't do it, Jetty, because he called her Jetty, right?
Yeah.
And she said, why not, Ned? And he said, because I'd have to shave every morning and look myself in the mirror, and I don't think I'd be able to do it if I had to fall in with the boys. And I thought that was really, to me, that was an interesting story because it told a lot about his character.
Yes.
And to me, it kind of echoed in the kind of character Dad had too.
Yeah.
Dad was a very honest person. I mean, we were brought up to do everything by the book, honestly, and always, the right way, right?
Yes, we now come to the next generation, who's William Austin Oke, your father,
Right.
and your husband.
Yeah.
And he, of course, got into the business with his father, of course.
Yes.
And he also learned printing, right? Print
Yeah.
press.
49 years, Pat.
Wow. Typesetting and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
We all learned that.
You all learned that. You learned typesetting?
And we got told off lots of times for being down there when we weren't supposed to be.
You putting letters in upside down things?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
I learned to read backwards because that's how you set type is backwards.
And that's
Yeah.
how you edit.
And that's how you edit.
Wow. What an education.
Dad would drive from here to St. John's, and he'd see every sign with every typo on it. It used to drive him crazy.
Did you work there, Molly, as well as a printer?
Yeah, yeah.
Self-
I said I
typesetting?
was the printer's devil.
How so? How so? Tell
I
me.
did all the odd jobs and all the books and all the
Record keeping.
records.
Did you do print typeset as well? Did
No.
you?
I didn't get that far.
No. No.
No, I did the other things.
I can remember as a young man, young boy, age 15, 14, being involved with the Catholic Youth Club and coming down and getting posters printed.
Yeah.
With Bill back then.
Well, how many-
Mr. Oak to me.
How many stores?
Oh, my.
You counted one night how many stores you delivered, because they deliver. That's how they
Funeral
earn their
notices.
pocket money.
And
Yeah.
funeral
It was
notices.
funeral notices, and we used to have to
Take
deliver
them and
them
drop
to
'em
every
all off.
store in this town.
Yeah.
And she'd take some and I'd take some, and we'd flip to see who went east and who went west. I counted 23
Yeah.
stores
Yeah.
from Bears Cove
And
to
if-
the river.
If you didn't deliver a poster to a store,
Yeah.
you got a phone call saying
You didn't come.
you didn't come.
And of course, all that was advertisement, all that was money,
Yeah.
in the
That's
sense
right.
of, and then there was this sense of patriotism too that your father would have
Mm-hmm.
had as a business person, because I'm sure with a lot of guilt around not getting to one of those stores,
That's
right?
Oh,
Didn't want to
yes.
be treated differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
had
the-
many long discussions with your father years ago at Knights Columbus about these things.
Yeah.
And now you're refreshing my memory about
Yeah.
some of
Yeah.
those stories he told me. Yeah.
Well, if he
Go ahead.
would do like the fair book or the music
Oh, yes.
festival book, I mean, there are machines now that just totally, make the books.
Right.
But in those days, we'd have to pick them up. So Dad would bring them up and put them on the dining room table
We
upstairs.
collated 'em.
And I tell you, we'd have vertigo going around the table, picking
Picking
up
them
the
up.
books, and then Dad would staple. But we did it as a family. We never even thought that
But hard.
it wasn't work. It was just something we did as a family together. I think in a lot of ways it made us closer because we all had to work together.
Yeah.
And
I was always so envious of Mike Farrell going in there and going to work at a print shop. I always wanted to be in that print shop.
I
seeing
came when he
what
was
would-
17.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mike-
he's a great guy.
I'm a
Yeah.
year or two older than Mike, and I remember going in there and seeing Mike with his, his old the pants
Yeah.
on, the leather pants
Yeah.
and so on,
Yeah.
and he was going around with this and pushing
Yeah.
this leather in the air. I remember saying, "How come I'm not playing hockey and I could be doing this?" And I wasn't,
Fascinating.
and I wasn't very good at hockey either. So, go back to to Bill now, Mr. Oke, as as Bill was saying, he would say, "Don't
No,
call me
No,
Mr.
that's right. He
He'd
wouldn't
say,
be
"Call me
impressed."
Bill."
Call me
Yeah.
Bill." So going back to him, what would you say was the greatest thing he taught you? I mean, this is
To
tough.
give back to my community.
Yeah.
And it's a gene that I got from Dad and Mom.
Right,
Absolutely. I credit him with that.
right, exactly.
They both were givers and helpers, and I think that we do it in different ways, but I think we find any opportunity to help. And I can't tell a lie
Go ahead.
because I just feel so guilty. I mean, you always man up or own up or person up, in life, and I think that was the essence of what it was like growing up, in our
Well,
family.
that's the way life, that's the way we were, I guess.
You helped where you could.
Yeah.
And your father and his father before him were Masons, right? And Grandmasters, I think that's the correct term? For
No,
the
not,
Masons?
Not
not
Dad.
Dad. Not Dad.
No.
Not Bill.
Edward Oke
Edward
was,
was.
and William Austin Oke was.
Yes.
His
Yeah.
father, yeah.
You ever-
But
you
Not
not
Dad.
mine.
Was he in the Masons at all?
Very
Yeah.
short.
Remember?
He joined, but it wasn't for him.
Yeah, no. Okay.
He
Well, people-
joined after his
But he was in
father
everything
died,
else.
But he was
Not
in,
everything is for everybody, right?
No.
I think your father might have been in Knights Columbus secretly.
Yes.
Every
Probably
Friday
was.
afternoon.
On Friday
Let
afternoon.
me tell you, Saturday mornings he'd drop in as well, and we were kids. If you were with him or if I was
We were
with
there
him,
too.
we were allowed to go into the Daltonian Club.
Oh,
we were, yeah, and
Yeah.
and I think that, Harbour Grace, as you know, Pat, is very divided. Not so much now, of course, but years ago
Years
it was
ago,
very
yeah.
divided by education and religion and everything
Yeah.
else.
Thank God we're over that.
Yes, thanks be to God. But as a child, I never knew any difference because we always went and bellied up to the bar at Saturdays. I got my pop and my chips on a little table, and I was good to go.
Just imagine.
Yeah.
But
little Protestant girl up to the bar in Knights Columbus. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, in my case, when I was a little girl, I was at the Legion with my grandfather. So
There you go.
it's all good.
It's all
Yeah.
good.
But I mean, Dad was, he was the regatta committee, he was the historical committee, he
Fire
was the
department.
fire department, he was the
Yeah.
Sea Cadets.
Yeah.
He was.
Molly, how did you? Sorry to cut you off. You were going to say, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say the fire department was Bill's thing.
Yeah.
Really,
Yes.
Was
he ever fire chief?
No.
No. But
Never
he was
wanted, never wanted
never
to be
wanted
fire
that-
chief.
he never
was
wanted
on
that
the
to-
executive, but never wanted to be
Dad
chief.
was a leader behind the scenes.
He was a
Pat.
leader
I
from
really
behind.
believe
Yeah.
that was Dad's. He didn't want to be the upfront, I'm in control person. He wanted to be the person behind the scenes that other people went to and asked for advice.
Yeah,
I
that's
really
true.
think that's and
I
you
don't
know
think
what?
he set out to do that, that's
no,
just who
but
he
that's
was.
who his role was.
Yeah.
And I mean, as a child, as a teenager, as a grown woman, I would do the same thing.
He was a go-to type of person, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Go-to. Well, I thank God he was there for all of us because we all now are still dependent on stuff he brought forward. And I remember at times years ago, even my recent history, say going back 15, 20 years ago, calling Bill about something or other that we needed back. But I remember going into that print shop many years ago and getting things done for the Catholic Youth Club, like 50 years ago now.
Yeah.
Dating myself.
I was just
Right? And then
Yep.
getting these sheets done off and ordering like 10 of these posters, and I remember your father shaking his head and saying, 10?
Yeah.
Gotta get all this work for 10, but he'd
Yeah.
do it, he'd still do
Yeah.
it, right?
Sure.
So I was going to ask you, how, if you don't mind me asking a personal question,
No.
how did you meet Bill?
Well, years ago, life was different. And I lived in Bay Roberts. I grew up in Bay Roberts.
Hurley Eye, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a group of us there were dances in each community.
Right.
And a group of us would get together and probably hire a taxi to
Right.
take us down to the dances.
Okay.
And I mean, we just went in packs, It
To
was
Harbour Grace?
the Harbour Grace and
Okay.
Carboneer,
Yeah.
and then they would do the same.
Okay. And there it happened.
And they're, you know, one thing, I mean, you got around in packs, and
Yeah.
at that time there wasn't very many couples as such, there was packs. And
Okay.
When he
Wow.
started to drive into the Grace, she was in a nursing school. When he used to
Okay.
start to drive in there, I guess, you know.
Wow.
yeah,
Just imagine, eh?
but life was different then, you know, much simpler,
I was
really.
just gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot easier.
a lot easier. And we didn't think probably it was simple, you know, but it was a lot easier. And
I did note one other person here. His name is John Oak, right?
yeah,
And John Oak apparently was the gentleman who pointed out to Stenson, who was looking for a place to have the airfield.
yes,
He was the man who actually pointed out as being this might be the most opportune, the best place to
Yeah.
put the field.
Mm.
So John Oak then was Edward Oak, Nettie Oak's
Brother.
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 Okay. Did you ever hear any stories about him or anything?
Not really, but there's a little
Twist to that.
argument in the family as to
Oh.
whether it was John or Edward who actually
Or
did
Ned.
that.
That
So,
actually,
is that right?
Yeah.
He got labeled as, in our annals, he's the one who actually did it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But there's some question as to
There's
whether.
some question, yeah,
Because
because we were always told it was Ned.
Because I see the picture of him in the book with the axe behind his shoulder saying,
yes,
nobody better question that.
But I mean, the story that was always told to us was that Ned was on the train, and this guy was on the train and struck up a conversation and talked about airfields, and that's how we ended up here. I didn't know any different until later years when I actually worked at the museum one time and read something and
Okay.
said to my grandmother, like, Nan, I thought, you know, Bamsey did that. And she said, well, as far as I know, he did.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter. I mean,
One of them did.
one of
One
them
of them
did, but
did.
it was just a little interesting bit in our family, you know.
Yeah. Well, it was such a nice, pleasant hour, I think, we spent here.
one thing I got to
Sorry,
mention,
please. Yes.
Sophia Lilla,
Yes.
which was
Yeah.
she was actually,
The
I would
judge's
say,
wife.
yeah,
Yes. William's wife.
yeah, I would say before they were married, she was a teacher.
At St.
And
Paul's,
I-
correct?
She was I would say she was the first female principal in Newfoundland,
Yeah.
because
Wow.
she was a female principal.
There you
and-
go. That's what steps you
Yeah,
followed. eh?
well, didn't know it at the time, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And she got the OBE,
Yeah.
which you know about.
The Order
Yes,
of
the Order of
British
British
Empire.
Empire,
the
yes.
British
Yes.
Empire. Edward has that.
Now, what was that for? What was that? Her
There
real-
was the Women's Patriotic Association,
Right.
and she was in locally and all over the province, actually, of supporting the vets,
Yes.
and she was very instrumental in working in that.
Very
And that
strong
was why
woman, apparently.
apparently
Yeah.
she was pretty. Now there's a little story about her
Oh, please
and
tell.
the building of that house where we lived latterly.
Yes.
You know, on Victoria Street.
Yeah, yes.
Grandmother Oak always said that this grandmother Oak told her before they were married, her to-be husband was building this house,
Right.
and she would walk down Harvey Street, and times were such then that she couldn't look towards where the house was being built, because that wasn't a thing to do.
Oh, my God. Just imagine.
This town was bound very much by convention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Well,
it?
I mean, the other side
a
of it
point in
is
time.
the day that she got married, she was finished employment. She was no longer able to be the principal at the school.
No,
Just imagine.
Yeah.
yeah.
Getting to order the British Empire and
Yeah.
not be allowed to work because
Mm-hmm.
you were married.
Yeah.
Just imagine, eh? Thank God times have changed.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But maybe some of the things we should kept, those are one
Well,
of
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
some of them,
yeah.
thank God we haven't kept, eh?
That's
No.
right.
We would never had you as principal. if we- yeah.
No, but
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, so thanks for sharing that story.
But I just felt that
it's worth telling.
it's worth telling.
Yeah.
Well,
It
there's a lot of independent stories of independent women in the town, not least of which is Frances or Fanny
Yeah.
and Sophia,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
yourselves,
Yeah.
right? Look how much we've grown, eh? And the Oaks still exist, eh? As a
Yeah.
family.
Well,
That's
the
great.
youngest one of us, in terms of,
Of this
Oaks.
line.
Yes.
Edward Langdon, my
Yes.
brother.
Yes.
I mean, he has a son, Andrew.
William Austin.
Andrew William Austin. So like there still is a little bit of the name down through.
Yeah.
Now he
Yeah.
lives in Calgary and
Yeah.
probably will not come back, and I doubt very much if Andrew will ever come
No.
back to here, which is kind of sad.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and we will continue to update, you know, our family trees on our side to hopefully keep
Now,
it through.
the chap that wrote this book is Bill's cousin,
His
Okay.
Ned's sister Gladys's son.
yeah,
Okay.
John Templeton.
Right.
He's
Still
he's
living?
the family
Still
historian.
living in
He's still
Manitoba,
living
yeah.
in
And you do
Manitoba.
have a relative at the Center for Newfoundland Studies who just
John,
retired.
yeah.
John.
She's worked with me through a lot of my books.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
And she keeps saying, "Now tell the truth here, Pat." You gotta tell the truth."
Yeah,
She'll keep you on the straight and
She
narrow.
does.
Yeah.
She did. She's
She's lovely.
retired now, eh?
yeah,
Yeah.
but she's a lovely person.
No, she looked exactly. I thought a lot like Bill, in my opinion. I could
Yes.
see the
Yeah,
notes in it.
yeah, and her
Yeah.
mother looked a lot more like Bill than she
Okay.
does, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're still close.
Oh,
matter of
yes.
fact.
We make a point to have lunches together every so many weeks so we don't lose contact.
Oh,
Because
really?
it's hard, you know, sometimes when everybody's spread abroad, but
And one thing I got to say too, Edward Langdon, Bill's father, was, he was a gentleman. He was a very kind man. And he was my father-in-law, and sometimes you can't say that about your
No.
father-in-law.
Yeah.
But he was a real gentleman, like I said, a very, very kind man. And I think he didn't talk as much about the family history as probably grandmother did.
yes.
She talked more than, he knew it, but he didn't talk about it. But he was a very kind man. And I'm sure he did a lot of things behind the scenes that nobody ever knew about.
Yeah.
When grandfather and when dad died, we found out many, many things that they'd both done that we never knew anything about.
No.
Right. Isn't that the way with our parents?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We always find out those really good things
That's right.
about them after
Yeah.
they've gone, you know.
Yeah.
But that's just the way
That's
life is.
life
I
is,
guess our
yeah.
kids and our descendants will be finding out some of the good things that we hopefully
Yes.
have done, you know.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I'd like to thank the crew here today as well for coming along and doing this project with us. So